Imagine, the year is 1066. It was a massive year for England, a real game changer. One of those dates in history that everyone remembers, or at least they should. The Battle of Hastings, fought on a single long and bloody day in October, was an absolutely huge turning point for the country. It was the ultimate decider, the final round, for who would wear the crown and be the next King of England, a truly monumental decision that would affect everybody. This was not just any ordinary fight between two angry men. It was a battle for the future of the whole country, for its very soul. One moment, England was an Anglo-Saxon kingdom with its own traditions and language. The next, well, everything began to shift and change in ways no one could have fully predicted at the time. So, who were the main players in this epic drama, this contest for a kingdom? On one side, we had the English, and they were led by their brand new king, Harold Godwinson. He had only just become king in January of that same year, so he hadn't had much time to get comfortable on the throne. Harold was an Anglo-Saxon, a powerful and respected nobleman, and many of the English people genuinely liked him and thought he was a strong leader. He had powerful friends among the other English earls, and a big army known as the Fyrd, made up of loyal soldiers. He truly believed he was the rightful king, chosen by the English themselves. He was absolutely ready to defend his crown and his country from anyone who dared to challenge him. And believe me, challenges were definitely on their way. On the other side of this royal squabble was a very powerful and ambitious duke from across the sea in France. His name was William, and he was the Duke of Normandy. Now William had a very different idea about who should be sitting on the English throne. He firmly believed that he should be the King of England. He told everyone that the old king, Edward the Confessor, who had died right at the beginning of 1066, had actually promised him the throne years before. King Edward, you see, had died without any children, which always causes a big problem for royal succession. William was known for being a tough and ruthless warrior, and he had a formidable army of well-trained knights. He was utterly determined to cross the English Channel and take what he believed was rightfully his by force if necessary. Now, why all this fuss and bother about a crown? Well, being the King of England in the 11th century was a very big deal indeed. The king had enormous power, controlled vast amounts of land, and could command great wealth and influence. As we know, the previous king, Edward the Confessor, passed away in January 1066. Crucially, he didn't have any sons or daughters to inherit the kingdom, leaving a dangerous power vacuum. This created a massive question mark. Who would be the next ruler? Harold Godwinson, one of the most powerful English noblemen, was crowned king almost immediately after Edward's death by the English Council of Wise Men, the Witan. But William of Normandy wasn't happy about that at all, not one bit. And to make things even more complicated, another fierce warrior, Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, also fancied his chances for the English crown. It was a recipe for a right royal rumble. King Harold Godwinson must have felt like he was juggling fire from the very start of his reign. He wasn't just dealing with the serious threat from William of Normandy across the Channel. Oh no, another incredibly fierce warrior, the formidable Harald Hardrada, who was the King of Norway, also had his eyes firmly set on the English throne. Hardrada was a legendary Viking, renowned far and wide for his incredible battle skills and his fearsome reputation. So poor King Harold found himself with powerful enemies threatening to invade from two different directions at once. He had to be extraordinarily clever, incredibly brave, and move very, very quickly to have any hope of protecting his newly acquired kingdom. It must have been an unbelievably stressful time to be a king. So the first major challenge Harold faced came from the north. Before William could even make his move, Harold Hardrada, accompanied by Harold Godwinson's own rebellious brother, Tostig, invaded the north of England. They sailed up the rivers with a huge fleet of Viking longships and actually won an early battle against the northern English earls at a place called Fulford Gate near York. But King Harold was nothing if not decisive. He gathered his royal army and marched them north at an astonishing speed, covering hundreds of miles in just a few days. He completely surprised the Viking invaders at a place called Stamford Bridge on September 25th. The English soldiers fought brilliantly and won a massive bloody victory. Both Harold Hardrada and Tostig were killed in the fierce fighting. Phew, One major problem dealt with, but another, even bigger one, was just about to begin. Meanwhile, while King Harold was busy dealing with the Viking invasion in the north, William of Normandy was far from idle. He was using the summer months to meticulously prepare his own massive invasion force. He gathered a huge army consisting of thousands of well-equipped knights, professional soldiers and archers, drawn not just from Normandy but from other parts of France and beyond. He also ordered the construction of hundreds of wooden ships to carry all these men, their weapons and their vital war horses across the English Channel. This was a colossal undertaking, a logistical nightmare. Imagine all those soldiers and nervous horses waiting impatiently on the French coast for the wind to be just right for sailing. William had been planning this invasion for months, even securing the Pope's blessing and a special banner which made his soldiers feel like they were fighting a holy war. Then, just a few short days after his stunning victory at Stamford Bridge, King Harold received the terrible, gut-wrenching news he must have been dreading. William and his Norman army had finally landed on the south coast of England near a place called Pevensey on September 28th. Harold and his loyal soldiers were utterly exhausted. They had just fought a huge, brutal battle against the Vikings and then had to endure the grueling march all the way back south. There was simply no time for them to rest and recover properly. Harold had to make a critical decision: to gather his tired army once more and march south as fast as humanly possible to confront the new invaders. The fate of England, his crown and his people now depended entirely on the outcome of this next, even more perilous encounter. The two armies, the English led by King Harold and the Normans led by Duke William, finally met on a gently sloping hill near a small town called Hastings. The date was October 14th, 1066. A day that would be forever etched into the annals of English history, a day of destiny. King Harold, showing good tactical sense, chose a strong defensive spot for his army on the crest of what is now known as Senlac Hill. His English soldiers, who were mostly infantry fighting on foot, armed with fearsome long-handled axes, spears and swords, formed a very strong, tightly packed shield wall. This was a traditional Anglo-Saxon battle tactic they were very skilled at. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their overlapping shields creating an almost impenetrable barrier, making it incredibly difficult for the enemy to break through their ranks. William's Norman army was quite different in its composition and tactics. They had a large contingent of knights on horseback known as cavalry, which was their main strike force, and also many archers equipped with powerful bows and arrows. The Normans launched the first attacks with their knights bravely charging up the hill towards the English line. But the English shield wall held firm, repelling wave after wave of Norman assaults. The battle raged for hours and hours, from early morning until dusk. It was an incredibly fierce, brutal and very bloody contest. Both sides fought with astonishing bravery, courage and sheer determination, neither willing to give an inch. Imagine the terrifying noise of it all, the constant shouting of battle cries, the deafening clash of steel swords against wooden shields and iron helmets, the thundering hooves of the charging war horses, and the screams of the wounded and dying. The battle was incredibly close, hanging precariously in the balance for a very long time. At one crucial point during the afternoon, a rumour suddenly spread like wildfire through the Norman ranks that Duke William himself had been killed in the fighting. Seeing their leader apparently fallen, some of his Norman soldiers panicked and started to retreat down the hill. But William was a clever and courageous leader. He quickly rode amongst his wavering men, dramatically taking off his helmet so they could all see his face, and shouted loudly, "Look at me while I am alive, and by God's grace I shall yet win." This bold act rallied his troops and gave them new courage to continue the fight. The Normans also employed a cunning, though risky, tactic. They pretended to run away in feigned retreats, and when some of the less experienced English soldiers broke ranks to chase them, the Normans would suddenly turn around and attack their pursuers, inflicting heavy casualties and gradually weakening the solid English shield wall. Then, late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set, came the terrible, decisive moment that ultimately sealed the fate of King Harold and his English army. Poor King Harold was killed. How exactly did it happen? Well, the most famous and enduring story, vividly depicted on the Bayeux tapestry, is that he was struck in the eye by a stray Norman arrow. Other accounts suggest he was cut down and killed by a group of Norman knights who broke through the shield wall. Whatever the precise manner of his death, with their brave king fallen, the English soldiers finally lost heart, and their resolve began to crumble. Their formidable shield wall, which had held for so many hours, eventually broke. The Normans had won the hard-fought battle. It had been an incredibly long and brutal day of fighting, one of the longest and most fiercely contested medieval battles ever recorded, lasting for over 9 exhausting hours. With King Harold dead on the battlefield and the English army defeated and scattered, William of Normandy, the victor, began his march towards London, the most important city in England. He faced some initial resistance, but eventually the remaining English nobles and leaders submitted to him. On Christmas Day, 1066, a hugely symbolic date, William was crowned King of England in the newly built Westminster Abbey, the very same place where Harold had been crowned less than a year before. From that day on, he became known as William the Conqueror. This coronation marked the definitive beginning of a brand new chapter for England. The centuries of Anglo-Saxon kings were over. Now, a Norman king, a French-speaking duke, was on the throne, and England would never be quite the same again. William the Conqueror brought many sweeping and profound changes to his new kingdom. One of the first things he did was to confiscate the land owned by the Anglo-Saxon nobles who had fought against him, and give it to his loyal Norman knights and barons as a reward for their service. This was all part of a new system of land ownership and social structure called feudalism, where land was held in return for military service to the king. These new Norman lords quickly began to build strong, imposing stone castles all over England, not just as homes, but as powerful symbols of their authority and to control the often rebellious English population. Just think of the iconic Tower of London. William himself started building the White Tower shortly after his conquest. The language spoken by the ruling class also changed dramatically. The Norman kings and nobles spoke Norman French, and gradually many French words became absorbed into the English language. Words we use every day like castle, parliament, judge, army, and bacon all have Norman French origins. English law also began a slow process of transformation, mixing with Norman legal customs and practices. To properly understand and effectively govern his newly conquered kingdom, and of course to know how much tax he could raise, William ordered a massive and incredibly detailed survey of England. This monumental undertaking, completed in 1086, was compiled into a great book known as the Domesday Book. It was like a giant nationwide census, the first of its kind in England. It meticulously listed all the land, who owned it, both before and after the conquest, how many people lived there, villagers, slaves, free men, what resources like woodland or mills they had, how many animals they possessed, and crucially how much it was all worth. It was an absolutely amazing administrative achievement for its time. The Domesday Book is an invaluable treasure for historians today, giving us an unparalleled insight into what England was like nearly 1,000 years ago, and showing the sheer scale of the changes brought about by the Norman conquest. So, as you can see, the Battle of Hastings on that fateful day in October 1066 really was a massive, undeniable turning point in English history. It definitively marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule in England, which had lasted for over 600 years, and ushered in the era of Norman dominance. The victory of William the Conqueror changed England forever, and in so many fundamental ways. It altered who ruled the country, how land was owned and distributed, the language people spoke, especially those in power, the laws they lived under, and even the very architecture of the buildings they saw around them, with all those new stone castles dominating the landscape. The echoes of that one incredibly long and bloody day in October 1066 can still be felt and traced in Britain today. It truly set England on a completely new path, profoundly shaping the nation we know now.